In September 2020, a mid-level government official walked up to a podium and quietly detonated a bomb inside the global defense community. That was Will Roper, the U.S. Air Force's acquisition chief, casually announcing that America had already designed, built, and flown a full-scale sixth-generation fighter prototype. Not a subscale model or computer render, but a real aircraft, flying over real ground, that had already broken performance records he was not permitted to discuss in public. While the rest of the world was still debating whether sixth-generation fighters were even theoretically achievable within the next 2 decades, the United States had been quietly flying one in the Nevada desert for months. Nobody saw it coming at all, and that, as you're about to find out, is entirely the point. That invisible aircraft is now officially designated the F-47, unofficially nicknamed the Phoenix, and it is the subject of everything that follows. Let's dive in. Section 1. The Phantom in the Nevada Sky. To fully appreciate what Roper announced in 2020, you need to understand just how impossible it was supposed to be. The F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, America's current fifth-generation platform, took roughly 2 decades and nearly $400 billion to develop from concept to operational service. It became the definitive cautionary tale of modern defense procurement. Requirements that kept ballooning, costs that kept spiraling, timelines that kept slipping until nobody could say with a straight face when the thing would actually be ready. By the time it finally entered service, the institutional consensus had essentially calcified around a depressing assumption that major fighter development would always take 30 years, always cost a generational defense budget, and there was simply nothing anyone could do about it. That was the nature of the beast. Accept it and move on. So how, in the middle of all that institutional exhaustion, did the Air Force secretly build a sixth-generation prototype in a fraction of the time? The answer is something called digital engineering, and it's genuinely one of the more underappreciated revolutions in modern aerospace. Rather than building expensive physical prototypes at every stage of development, discovering flaws, tearing them apart, rebuilding them from scratch, digital engineering uses extraordinarily detailed virtual models to test and refine every system before a single physical component gets manufactured. You crash test the airframe thousands of times in simulation. You run the engine through a decade of operational stress in a virtual environment. You only build the physical aircraft once you already know with very high confidence that it works. The result was what Roper called the Digital Century Series, a vision of fielding entirely new aircraft designs every 5 to 10 years rather than every 30, recapturing the blistering pace of American aviation innovation from the 1950s when the Air Force was introducing new fighter designs almost annually. And here's where the naming gets interesting, because the F-47 designation is doing a lot of work simultaneously. It references the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, the rugged, high-altitude World War II workhorse that escorted bombers deep into the most dangerous airspace on Earth and came home when nothing else could. It references 1947, the year the U.S. Air Force was formally established as an independent branch of the military. And it references the 47th President of the United States, who announced the contract award on March 21, 2025, and tied his administration's identity directly to the program's future. 3 layers of deliberate symbolism compressed into 2 digits. Washington loves this kind of thing, and honestly, so do we. Section 2. The Caged Lion and the Pacific Problem. Before we get into what the F-47 actually is, we need to talk about why it needed to exist. Or more specifically, why the greatest air superiority fighter ever built is no longer enough. The F-22 Raptor is, by any conventional measure, a masterpiece of aerospace engineering. Its combination of supercruise capability, all-aspect stealth, and sensor fusion made it essentially untouchable in the threat environment it was designed for. A high-intensity air war over European skies against Soviet legacy aircraft and radar networks. In that context, the Raptor is exactly what it was built to be. The problem is that the European theater is no longer the primary concern, and the Indo-Pacific, which very much is, operates on a completely different set of physical constraints. Here's the blunt reality. The F-22's combat radius is roughly 530 nautical miles. Put that on a map of the Pacific and watch the range bubble fail to reach the Chinese coastline from any island base that isn't already sitting deep inside Chinese anti-access zones. To operate effectively in that environment, F-22s need constant aerial refueling support, which means large, slow, radar-visible tanker aircraft that every Chinese radar installation in the region can track from 500 kilometers away. The Raptor's stealth advantage essentially evaporates the moment it becomes a dependent escort mission for an aircraft that glows like a lighthouse on enemy screens. And that's before you get to the second problem, which is arguably worse. Chinese air defense development over the past decade has been specifically and deliberately engineered to defeat fifth-generation stealth. The F-22's stealth profile is primarily optimized against X-band radar frequencies. The right call when it was designed, given what the threat environment looked like at the time. But China has since invested heavily in infrared search and track systems and low-frequency radar networks that operate on entirely different principles, and those systems can detect fifth-generation platforms that are effectively invisible to conventional radar. The stealth cheat code in the specific theater where it matters most is no longer reliable, so stop and think about what that actually means strategically. America's most advanced fighter can't reach the fight without exposing its support aircraft, and the stealth that was supposed to protect it is being systematically countered by the adversary it was redesigned to face. That's not a gap. That's a fundamental mismatch between the tool and the problem. The F-47 was built to close that mismatch, with a combat radius exceeding 1,000 nautical miles and a stealth architecture designed to be invisible across the full spectrum of frequencies China has built its detection networks around. The Raptor isn't obsolete. It's magnificent, lethal, and completely unable to reach the territory it was born to protect. A caged lion is still a lion, but it can't defend the jungle from inside the cage. Section 3 on the $300 million crisis, the near death, and the unpredictable comeback. By early 2024, the program that would become the F-47 was in genuine danger of dying on a spreadsheet. Cost projections for the crewed platform had climbed to approximately $300 million per aircraft, 3 times the unit cost of an F-35, and that number generated serious alarm both inside the Pentagon and on Capitol Hill. Air Force Secretary Frank Kendall ordered what the service carefully framed as a strategic pause, presenting it publicly as a deliberate, measured reassessment of requirements and a cost reduction exercise. In practice, the defense world read it as a near cancellation, and the industry rumors circulating at the time reflected exactly that anxiety. Programs that get strategically paused at $300 million per unit have a mixed survival record. The question wasn't whether the program was struggling. The question was whether it would survive the struggle. Then March 21st, 2025 arrived, and everything changed in a way no one had expected. President Trump announced not just the program's resurrection, but the contract award, and the winner was Boeing. Not Lockheed Martin, which had built both the F-22 and the F-35, and carried every institutional advantage a prime defense contractor could possibly carry into a competition like this. Boeing, whose defense division had been grinding through a string of high-profile failures and cost overruns that had genuinely damaged its reputation as a reliable prime contractor. The announcement landed like a genuine upset in the defense community, the kind that makes people go back and reread the press release to make sure they got it right. What made the Boeing win even more remarkable was a detail that surfaced afterward. Boeing had apparently committed roughly $2 billion of its own capital to a classified production facility before the contract was even awarded. Think about that for a second. They built the facility on the bet that they would win a competition they hadn't won yet, in a program that had just been publicly paused amid cancellation rumors. That is either extraordinary institutional confidence or extraordinary institutional desperation, and honestly, both explanations are plausible. And both are fascinating. Now here's the detail about the F-47 that stops people cold when they first encounter it. and it's hiding in the program's official patch. The patch features a rising phoenix above 6 red stars, almost certainly a reference to the classified testing site at Groom Lake, the facility known publicly as Area 51. The Latin motto reads Superamus perstamus ledimus. We overcome, we endure, we rejoice. All of that is striking enough on its own, but look closer at the lower portion of the patch, and you'll find a subtle white outline that, once you recognize it, you cannot unsee. It's the Chinese eastern coastline. An American military program embedded the identity of its primary strategic adversary directly into its official heraldry, in plain sight, on a patch that anyone could examine. That's not a slip. That's a declaration. Section 4. The Anatomy of a 6th-Generation Hunter. All right, here's where it gets genuinely mind-bending from an engineering standpoint. And I promise this is more interesting than it sounds. Let's start with the airframe. The most immediately striking thing about every credible rendering and imagery leak associated with the F-47, including a sequence that surfaced in a Pratt & Whitney engine development video that raised a lot of eyebrows, is the complete absence of vertical tail surfaces. No vertical stabilizers, no rudders, nothing projecting upward from the fuselage in the way that every fighter jet you've ever seen has. That tailless blended wing body configuration is not an aesthetic choice. It's a stealth imperative. Vertical tail surfaces are one of the primary contributors to radar cross-section on conventional fighter designs, particularly when radar energy hits them from the side or rear. Eliminating them entirely is the most structurally significant step toward achieving all-aspect stealth. Effective radar invisibility not just from the front, where most stealth optimization historically concentrates, but from every angle simultaneously. Chinese analysts have publicly identified what they believe are canard surfaces, small forward-mounted wings, in certain F-47 imagery, and have argued that these represent a stealth compromise that makes the aircraft inferior to their own designs. The Air Force's response has been complete silence, which is itself a communication. Are the canards a genuine design trade-off for high-altitude maneuverability? A necessary concession that the engineers accepted? Or a deliberate piece of visual disinformation, planted specifically to mislead foreign intelligence analysts who are scrutinizing every leaked image for weaknesses? Nobody outside a very small circle knows, and that ambiguity is probably exactly where the Air Force wants it. Now, the engine. And this is the part that genuinely deserves more attention than it gets in mainstream coverage. The F-47 will be powered by either the Pratt & Whitney XA-103 or the GEXA-102, and both are adaptive cycle engines built around a concept that has no real precedent in operational military aviation. A conventional jet engine is a fixed compromise. It's optimized for a specific operating condition, which means it's perpetually inefficient everywhere else. An adaptive cycle engine uses a third stream of airflow that opens and closes dynamically, depending on what the mission demands at any given moment. During the long transoceanic transit across the Pacific, it behaves like a fuel-efficient turbofan, extending range by roughly 25% compared to a conventional design. The moment the aircraft needs maximum combat performance, the third stream closes, the engine reconfigures itself, and thrust increases by about 10%. It is, in the most literal sense, two completely different engines sharing the same hardware. And the transition happens automatically in real time, without any pilot input required. There's a second function of the adaptive engine that doesn't get enough airtime: thermal management. The processing power, sensor arrays, and directed energy systems of a 6th-generation aircraft generate extraordinary amounts of heat that have to be handled somehow. The XA-103's architecture allows it to function as a heat sink, absorbing and dissipating that thermal load through the engine's airflow systems. Without that, the electronics that make the F-47 what it is would essentially overheat and fail during sustained high-performance operations. The engine isn't just propulsion, like it's infrastructure. And speaking of directed energy, the F-47 is designed to carry laser weapons capable of engaging incoming missiles at the speed of light, at ranges well beyond what any conventional close-in defense system can reach. megawatt-class airborne lasers, drawing power from that same adaptive engine architecture with effectively unlimited magazine depth as long as the engines are running. No finite supply of interceptor missiles, no reload window, no ammunition logistics tail. The traditional dogfight, the close-range, high-G, human versus human, aerial duel, may be genuinely permanently over, and the cockpit might be the most profound change of all. The F-47 pilot doesn't interact with the aircraft through conventional displays and a standard heads-up projection. The helmet system renders a synthesized 360-degree picture of the battle space that includes the ability to effectively see through the floor of the aircraft. Sensor feeds from every platform in the network assembled into a seamless, real-time situational view that no unaided human could construct from raw data. An AI co-pilot continuously processes that feed, prioritizes threats, manages aircraft systems, and presents the human with decision points rather than data floods. The pilot's job is not to fly the aircraft and simultaneously manage a tactical information overload. The AI handles both. The pilot's job is to make the calls that only a human being is authorized to make, the ones involving lethal force. The F-47 cockpit is a moral authority seat. Everything else is handled. Section 5. The quarterback and the swarm. Here's the thing about the F-47 that people tend to gloss over, and it's actually the most important thing about it. It was never designed to fight alone. The entire doctrine built around this aircraft positions the F-47 as a command node, the quarterback, in the Air Force's own language, for a surrounding fleet of autonomous collaborative combat aircraft, or CCAs. These are purpose-built drones, each specialized for a specific tactical role, flying in coordinated formation with the F-47 and operating under its direction. Some carry additional munitions, extending the effective magazine capacity of the overall formation without increasing the crewed aircraft's size or signature. Some carry electronic warfare systems, projecting a jamming footprint across a wider area than any single platform could cover. And some, and this is the one that tends to make people pause, are designed to function as interceptors and decoys, flying directly into incoming missile fire to protect the manned aircraft. The drone takes the hit. The F-47 survives to finish the mission. The Air Force's vision extends this concept to a fleet of more than 1,000 CCAs across the broader force structure, with individual F-47s managing significant portions of that network in real time. Which means the $300 million unit cost, as eye-watering as it is in isolation, needs to be understood as the price of the command node that makes the entire swarm coherent, not the price of a single fighter jet doing a single fighter jet's job. The CCAs are cheap enough to be expendable. The F-47 is the irreplaceable asset that makes their expendability strategically meaningful rather than just wasteful. What this also means, if you follow it to its logical conclusion, is the formal end of the Top Gun model of aerial combat. The idea that air superiority is fundamentally a contest between individual pilots and that the best human being in the cockpit wins. That model produced a century of celebrated fighter aces and shaped the entire culture of military aviation. The F-47 replaces it with something that looks considerably more like network management than personal combat, with a human whose primary value is judgment and moral authority, surrounded by autonomous systems that handle execution. Whether that's a gain or a loss for something important about the way we think about warfare is a genuinely interesting question, and it doesn't have a clean answer. Section 6. The race against the Red Dragon. And now comes the uncomfortable part. The part the Air Force would much rather discuss in closed congressional sessions than in public forums. China is not behind. And by at least one visible metric, China is currently ahead. By late 2024, the People's Liberation Army Air Force had already publicly test-flown two 6th-generation prototype aircraft, the Chengdu J-36 and the Shenyang J-50, in broad daylight, in front of cameras, in what was unmistakably a deliberate display intended for an international audience. The J-36 is a massive three-engine tailless platform that occupies the design space between a traditional fighter and a tactical bomber, with range and payload characteristics suggesting it was engineered for the same Pacific distances driving F-47 development. It reportedly features a reconfigurable intelligent surface capable of harvesting incoming radar energy and converting it into power for onboard avionics, a capability that American engineers are pursuing and have not yet publicly demonstrated in an operational system. The J-50 appears designed specifically for carrier operations, meaning China is potentially developing a sixth-generation naval variant simultaneously with its land-based capability. That's not catching up. That's running a parallel track. And then there's the White Emperor, the Bitey, a concept that surfaced in early 2026 that is either a genuine near-space combat platform or the most elaborate strategic misdirection in recent memory, reportedly designed to operate at the boundary between atmospheric flight and hypersonic near space, potentially carrying nuclear payloads. The White Emperor raises a question that would have seemed like science fiction 5 years ago. Is the F-47 going to need to fight above the atmosphere? Nobody outside of classified programs on both sides can answer that with confidence, which is itself a kind of success for China's information strategy. Because if American planners have to allocate resources against a threat that might not exist, the White Emperor has already done its job. The American rebuttal to the J-36 and J-50 test flights centers on the distinction between flying a prototype and integrating the systems that make a sixth-generation platform actually perform as advertised. The argument is that China is winning the visibility race, the public optics of aircraft doing impressive things in footage released to state media, while America is winning the capability race, quietly de-risking F-47 technologies through years of classified X-plane testing before anyone outside the program knew it was happening. It's a coherent argument. It may also be exactly what an institution tells itself when the public numbers are making it uncomfortable. The honest answer is that nobody outside a very small number of classified briefing rooms knows with certainty which nation fields an operational sixth-generation fighter first, or which one will be more capable when they do. What is certain is that whichever nation gets there first carries a strategic air dominance advantage that could shape the geopolitical balance for a generation. Section 7. The Last Manned Fighter Debate. Before we land this thing, there's one more argument that's been circling the F-47 program like weather that won't clear, and it deserves a straight look. Elon Musk and several voices in the broader tech-forward defense community have argued publicly that the entire premise of a $300 million manned fighter is strategically obsolete before it even flies. The argument is clean and intuitively compelling. If a coordinated swarm of $5 million autonomous drones can cover the same battle space, absorb the same attrition, and execute the same missions as a single crewed aircraft at a fraction of the cost, then the manned jet is a legacy fetish dressed up as a capability requirement. Why are we building 60 of these things when the same budget buys thousands of expendable autonomous systems? The Air Force's counter-argument is built around the scenario that drone advocates tend to underweight. A fully contested, communications-degraded, GPS-denied, AI-spoofed environment against a peer adversary who has spent years studying exactly how to break autonomous system coordination. In that environment, jamming degrades the communication links that make drone swarms coherent.